Welcome to Off the Page with Aspire Magazine, your best source for solutions, trends, and insights for the financial services industry. With me, Chuck Anderson, your host. Hey, welcome back to Off the Page. Going to start this episode off with a motivational element here, a speaker from Success for Advisors. He's the founder and CEO and a new friend of mine. Welcome, Derek Kinney.
Chuck, thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be with you today.
Most of our listeners and watchers are financial advisors. We also have carrier wholesalers, many people in the sales organization. They all have sales goals, right? They need to achieve their goals month by month, quarter by quarter for the full year. At the end of the year, certainly in January, we celebrate the success from the previous year. But by about February or March, which is when we're recording this segment for episode 2 of Off the Page, that's when people start to really feel the reality of the goals in front of them for the current year. And we wanted to kick off this episode with some good advice, motivational words from you, how to attack those goals and achieve them the best way.
Chuck, what you said is most people's biggest frustration and worry right now, so this couldn't be more timely. There's an exercise I did with my family many years ago. I called it family goal setting, and it began to have some really great results for my kids. Then I took it to my clients and had even better results. Then I began to share it with my top 1% advisors that I coach, and there's a secret I discovered, and that is most goals are built on a positive outcome. If I want to make more money, build a bigger business, I want to set this goal. But if you go negative and you ask yourself this question, what's at stake if I don't achieve the goal? It changes everything, Chuck. When you think about what you're going to miss out on, the retirement may not be what you want, or the time with your grandkids may not be available, or you may not build the business that you know you're capable of. Suddenly the negative says, you know what, if it is to be, it is up to me, and I'm going to make that happen. So think about asking yourself, what's at stake this year? I call myself an anti-regret specialist. I want to make sure you don't end the year regretting what you could have done, and this could be your moment right now.
Wow, those are very powerful words. Such a good motivational message to get to all of our watchers and listeners today. If you're in sales, you're an FA, you're a wholesaler, whatever your role is, like Derek said, really look at what's at stake. Take it seriously. Focus on what needs to get done and just battle through every hour, every day, every week through the rest of the year. And I hope everyone watching and listening achieves their biggest goals this year. And Derek, we can't thank you enough for having this powerful message kick off our episode for Off the Page. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Chuck.
You can find Derek's article on page 24 of the March-April edition of Aspire Magazine. Link in the description. This segment is sponsored by Corebridge Financial. Gain access to a comprehensive life insurance product portfolio, actionable insights, and proven tools to help you deliver solutions for every stage of life. From one of the largest and most established U.S. life insurance providers. Visit CorebridgeFinancial.com.
All right, we are ready now for our segment with Corebridge Financial. I get to introduce 2 very special guests today. First of all, Jason Kessler, Head of Sales at Market Synergy Group. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, bud. Hi. Great to be here, Chuck. Thanks for having me.
Jason wrote an article for the March-April edition of the Aspire Magazine called Faster, Simpler Sales, all about annuities, and it's excellent. I recommend you read it. And next up, from Corebridge Financial, we have Eric Taylor, Senior Vice President of Distribution for Individual Annuities. Welcome to you, Eric.
Thank you, Chuck. It's great to be with you.
I'm going to start this off by just talking about annuities. You know, they've really been evolving a lot over the last several years. Tremendous growth, really moving from a peripheral niche to a more of a strategic cornerstone for the financial planning process. So Jason, let's go off the page. In your article, you talk about a great term called retirement income architecture. So I wanted to just say a few words about that.
One of the big shifts that's happening in retirement planning right now is this conversation is moving away from simply accumulating assets and more toward designing income. The first step that advisors typically start with is understanding when to start Social Security, when to turn that income on. Then the next step is typically understanding clients' essential expenses, things like housing, healthcare, the core things that we all need to cover our expenses every month. And then if Social Security covers all of that, great. But if not, there's typically a gap. And it's that gap that becomes the planning challenge. And that's really where these, guaranteed income solutions like annuities can play a key role in helping to fill that gap by creating a predictable income that complements Social Security.
I wanted to just have Eric jump in here and talk about a little more specifically what is the age range for FAs to be bringing in annuities into the conversation with their clients?
So really where we see the optimal time where you are, really optimizing what the solution can do for you in your own retirement plan, and to give yourself the most optionality based on what happens is maybe in that 55-year-old range, maybe 10 years ahead of that traditional retirement age. That really gives you the flexibility to take advantage of what the product can do for your portfolio in the long term, as far as integrating it and having a guaranteed cash flow that you can plan around at a future date. But it also gives you the options to be able to pivot if something changes down the road.
That sounds good. And Jason, kind of taking a little bit further, because your article talks about RILAs, which I found to be very interesting. It's a newer product, different concept that's been around now, I guess, I'm thinking 5-10 years, but I could be wrong about that. You can correct me. But with the RILAs coming into be, does that allow you to, or does that open up the door to having an annuity conversation earlier in the client's life?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Eric said, these conversations are starting earlier, not because the clients are ready to turn income on, because they're thinking more seriously about risk and longer term outcomes. And that's really where RILAs have been interesting in attracting younger clientele, because they allow clients to stay engaged in the markets while introducing defined risk parameters through features like buffers and floors that offer them some protection.
With every type of product, there's going to be defined risk, and it's important for the FAs to really, understand the client's needs. And in this case, with certainly older clients, they want to still be in the market, but they also want it not to be so volatile at the later stages when they're getting close to retirement. Talk to me about risk management from that perspective.
So for example, is sequence of returns risk. Is I get closer to my retirement date, the impact of a significant market downturn that coincides when I am planning on taking that leave from my work and starting that retirement income journey. That can have a substantial impact if you are overexposed to assets that really might not be able to recover fast enough once you start withdrawing from them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Eric said, most clients aren't looking to exit the market. They simply want to avoid experiencing a full, impact of a market downturn. So I describe it as redefining how they participate in the market rather than stepping away from it. The goal is not to eliminate volatility. The goal is to actually just manage the level of volatility that the client experiences.
Next subject, kind of the lightning round here. I think I'll have Jason talk first about this subject, but there's guarantees with many of these products, right? For principal protection, lifetime income, but there's a lot of trade-offs. The advisor has to set expectations carefully, and there are some client misconceptions. That's a lot, but wanted to have you talk a little bit about that from a guarantee standpoint.
Yeah, we could fill a whole hour here. The reality is setting proper expectations might be the single most important thing that an advisor does with their client. For example, a lot of people assume annuities completely lock up their money, but we all know that in reality, most contracts allow penalty-free withdrawals within certain parameters. Another misconception is about the guarantees that are built into annuities. But it's features like caps and par rates and surrender schedules. They all exist because they support the guarantees that are built into the product. And when I talk to advisors, I encourage them to frame these as design features rather than restrictions. They're part of the structure that allows the annuity to deliver the outcomes like income predictability, and principal protection.
Great conversation, guys. Eric, thank you, and Corbridge Financial for being a sponsor of Aspire and Off the Page.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks again.
Jason, thank you for writing the article, and hope you have a good year at Markets Energy Group.
Thanks so much. This has been a lot of fun.
You can find Jason's article on page 30 of the March-April edition of Aspire magazine. Link in the description.
Daddy still got it.
Everyone has something to protect. For Phil Thomas, it's wealth that gets bigger by the generation. And Prudential has life insurance for wherever you are in life. so you can protect your life's work. Who's your rock?
Joining me in studio today is Phil Chuba, Vice President, Strategic Relationship Management at Prudential. Welcome, Phil.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chuck.
Great to have you with us. Phil and I worked together for many years, and we're with our good friend, Gonzalo Garcia, the Chief Advanced Markets Officer at Specialty Program Group. I'm really fascinated by the articles you've written and kind of help us understand. It's really going more from portfolios and people, or from portfolios and product to what, right? It's more about the people.
Yeah, Chuck, it starts with people, right? I mean, it's about people's origin stories and their fears and dreams and the life they envision for themselves and their families, and the legacies they wish to leave behind. I mean, so often we just jump into here's products and here's allocations and here's all the different things that go on with financial planning, and oftentimes we forget to ask the why question.
Yeah, so Gonzalo, why don't we get started here? The timing and the relevance of these articles is perfect. So let me start with the first question here. Most advisors would define risk as market risk and volatility. You argue the bigger threats are life risk. You got mortality, morbidity, longevity, taxes. So how do you help clients see and prioritize those risks in a way that leads to action?
Phil, thank you for the question. What I like to do is start with consequences, not kind of statistics and numbers and things. But market declines, for example, are often recoverable events. I mean, the markets will rebound, they always do. But oftentimes life events are irreversible things, and they create irreversible decisions, like selling assets at the wrong time, or losing independence, or changing a family's entire trajectory in some cases. And so once clients can visualize these scenarios, we can help them build kind of that risk architecture around that protects what matters most to them. And when a family is dealing with death or disability or a cognitive long-term event or a health event, while market risk matters, it really takes a second chair to liquidity, and at least I think, and liquidity protects assets from negative markets. After all, cash is king, right? So when you've got the cash, you're really well positioned to take care of some of those adverse issues that are going on in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've also mentioned clarity questions. What are your clarity questions, and how would it change the way advisors should interview their clients?
Yeah, that's something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and I guess that goes to tenure in the business. Like the two of you, we've been doing this for a little while. I think that we need to turn vague anxiety into design criteria. So let me kind of unpack that. And when we're listening to clients' language about what is enough, or what are they protecting, or what do they aspire to, or what do they fear, then the plan becomes a translation exercise, right? We need to convert those words into guardrails to help them live the intentionality that they desire and stick with good decisions under stress. And I spent a fair amount of time in the first part of the article talking about, behavioral psychology and amygdala hijacks and all the rest of that stuff. And we'll probably touch on that later. But I think better questions create better lives, and because they create better decisions. And one of my favorite questions is, what conversation does the family need to have while you're still in the room? So, again, I think it's really kind of trying to draw out, asking them empowering questions, asking them open-ended questions, and really to try to draw out what their whys are.
Certain topics are tough. They're going to make the client squirm. Things like mortality, health, aging, taxes. Why is visualization so hard, and why is avoidance itself a risk for the client?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chuck. It's and by the way, not everybody wants to engage with you in some of these conversations, right? Give me the quote, let me fill out the paperwork, let's get this done. They don't care, and that's okay. I'm not being judgmental about that, but as I talked in the first part of the article, the emotional brain resists uncomfortable futures. This is kind of that amygdala hijack thing that I just mentioned and that I talked about in the first article. Avoidance feels safer in the moment, right? So an unimagined future doesn't get planned for. And if you can't get people to imagine what that future could look like, it's really hard to do planning. And frankly, visually, a lot of people say, oh, I don't like to talk about death, or I don't like to talk about getting sick. Well, visualization is not morbid. It's an act of love and responsibility. I mean, you've got to really look at the future and figure out what it is that you're dealing with so that the families can fund a life that they actually want and avoid those predictable regrets.
Yeah, it really comes down to the risk architecture that you talk about with your clients, and that needs to be reevaluated over time, right? And health changes, the cognition part of life changes, and the family's roles change. So how do you maintain that?
Most people sit down with their financial advisors, whether it's quarterly or annually or twice a year or whatever. And I think annually is ideal, right? But it should really be event driven. Triggers are real life, right? The negative health diagnosis, the caregiving shifts when siblings are trying to take care of elderly parents. You have to change retirement timing because something didn't particularly pan out for you, and maybe you lost your job, or widowhood, divorce, or remarriage, or liquidity events. You sold a company, or cognitive warning signs. Mom or dad are getting dementia. Those issues need to be addressed at the time. When there's a meaningful event in a family, when roles change, risk changes. And I think that you really have to pay attention to what's going on in people's lives to know kind of how to create a space for them and give them some of the freedom that they need to deal with those issues, but also bring those guardrails into action to help them with the rest of their lives.
It's just really vital information. I really want to encourage our folks watching and listening to our program, especially the FAs with their clients, to take this to heart. I think what Gonzalo speaks about talks a lot about your role in terms of understanding the whole life of the client and how you deal with that, with all the different things you talk about, Gonzalo. And it's just really valuable information. I just thank you for being with us today. I thank you for being part of Aspire and Off the Page. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chuck. I would just end with this, and I'm so grateful that you guys allowed me to come back and do this. But, I have to say that the best plan is not the one that's most optimized. It's the one that the family can actually live with and stick with through the real life situations that they're dealing with. So I will leave you with that. I'm so grateful again to be on with you, and thank you for bringing me back. Appreciate
well said. Thank you. And Phil, thank you and Prudential for being our sponsor and helping with the interview today.
It was great to be here. Thank you, Gonzalo. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you,
Have
Phil.
a great day. Thanks so
All
much.
right. You as well.
Bye.
Take care.
You can find Gonzalo's article on page 20 of the March-April edition of Aspire magazine. Link in the description.
Okay, what is with that blanket?
Oh, it's my Securian blanket. It's an unsubtle metaphor for the feeling of security and confidence I have knowing I'm prepared for the future with insurance and retirement solutions from Securian Financial.
Learn more at securian.com.
Well, we are ready now for our segment with Securian Financial. And joining me in studio is Ann Hagerty, Director of Advanced Sales. Welcome.
Thank you, Chuck. I'm glad to be here.
We are glad you're here. And I really, telling the audience, too, that the article that Allison Salko wrote in the March-April edition was excellent. I read it thoroughly, had some questions for you. It talked about how, lived experience for women is more important than the numbers, net worth, the values, the different products that you use. How do you advise, or how do you help advisors with the phrases and behaviors that they promote when they're talking to those clients so that they're truly ready for a deeper estate planning conversation?
Such an important question, because I don't think people wake up in the morning and say, I'm 50 years old, I have $1 million, I need to do something with my estate plan.
Right.
Often it's through some type of experience with a parent or loved one, and they decide, hey, I don't want this to happen to my family, right? So that's an important key conversation that a financial professional might hear. And what they really want is peace, right? What they really want is that peace of mind. And so you want to listen for cues like, everyone relies on me for everything, maybe even in their extended family, right? You're the decision maker, you're sort of the person that everyone is going to go to and ask these questions of. And so as you realize that as a female, right, then you need that help to put that those phrases into action and make it mean something for that experience.
I love how you talk about peace of mind, because it's so important.
Right.
There is a confidence gap for women around this subject with things like estate planning and inheritance. So obviously, it's a knowledge gap and a confidence gap. What are the ways that the advisor can take on to kind of reduce that anxiety? And what are some things that they might be well intended that they shouldn't say? You know, what are those messages like?
Yep. I think it's just, instead of thinking about the person that you're working with as mastering estate planning and really having a deep understanding, it's just orientation, right? So it's thinking about what things that client is thinking about. So say I say to you, Chuck, who would you choose to take care of your children if something happened to you? Who would you choose to handle your finances if something happened to you? Who would you trust to make a medical decision for you, right? Those are easier questions to understand from an estate planning perspective. Even the word estate is kind of challenging, right? It sounds big, it sounds really important, but really it's just your wishes in document form. And I think that's really important. So as you think about the important role that you play in your family, it's important to think about, you know, putting that into words, putting that into a document so that your loved ones know what your wishes are. And I think that's also a gift, right? It's a gift to your family because they don't have to wonder, what would mom have wanted? What would she have thought in this scenario? You're really looking to think about what is meaningful for her.
But at some point, you do want to introduce the tools, right? And you want to be very keen on the legal and the estate planning and other kind of requirements. So how do you introduce those tools in the conversation?
Yep. So you're really kind of focusing on what decisions matter most right now. So maybe you have sort of now decisions and maybe later decisions. What can we decide now that would impact you? Kind of where are you at in your life today? And then bring in those technical concepts. Okay, you said that your brother is the person you would trust with finances. This is what a power of attorney does. This is exactly how it works. If Bill is a power of attorney, then he's going to be able to do these things for you. Go to your bank and handle your finances. You know, it could be if you are incapacitated, you could also be in jail in Mexico, right? So it could be a lot of different reasons why you might need this power of attorney, but the important part is explaining that it is technical in nature, but it can be explained in layman's terms. Really, all it is paperwork, and women are pretty good at paperwork for the most part, right? And so it's really important to bring that conversation forth and try to make it simplified, right? It's just putting your wishes into a document. It might have a complicated name, but really understanding the technical aspect is important for the financial professional, but they have to kind of bring it to meet the person at their experience, kind of where they're at.
And it really helps that if you do get to know them and you have those kind of deeper personal conversations, get them ready, and then when you introduce it, they're more receptive because you've already kind of addressed that. I want to ask you one more question that's really important because there was I think Allison called it out, and I've read it before. It's a NAIFA statistic, National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors, that 70% of women change the financial professional after the death of their spouse.
Yep.
Which just amazed me, and I really wanted it to be a subject that the financial advisors pay attention to. How do you make sure that you have that longevity, that it's not a temporary relationship, that it's actually a more permanent relationship?
Yep. I think that trust is so important, really, as a financial professional, listening and bringing that female counterpart into the conversation, right? A lot of relationships are built on the golf course or, in business relationships, and often there might be someone in the family that's a decision maker that is female that's not brought into those conversations. And I think it's important to go the extra mile, really build the trust with the female counterpart as part of that couple or individual, because that might be the person you end up working with. And this happened in my own family. So my grandparents owned a family farm, and my grandmother had a myriad of health issues. So she had several strokes, cancer, open heart surgery at age 40. So I think my grandfather probably thought that she would pass before him. He handled all the financial and estate plan, and he ended up in a horse accident and passed away, unexpectedly. Still lived to an older age, but then she was left with a complex estate plan that she didn't really agree to. And she admitted that that wouldn't have been the estate plan that she would have put in place, because what it did is it disinherited some family members, it caused turmoil with relationships, and oftentimes having both people have a voice can not only address maybe financial concerns, but also address concerns like family harmony. I want my kids to get along. I want them to be able to sit at the dinner table together. And for a lot of people, that's very important. So having both voices come in is important for that trust. And to say to your children, hey, I have a financial professional, Chuck, he's going to help you out, right? He's going to be there for you if something happens to me. That's really powerful to bring your family along, and for that financial professional to open up their doors to the family and be someone that I can say, I know you got me. I know you got my kids.
And this is such a great subject. I really wanted to thank you and really thank Allison who wrote the article. I wanted to encourage everybody to look at it in the March-April edition of Aspire. It's the Allison Salka interview or article, and it's about women in estate planning.
Yep.
And just hear you talk today just gave such a good overview and really additional information that was really helpful for us to hear. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.
Good. We'll have you back too.
Awesome. I'm excited.
You can find Allison's article on page 16 of the March-April edition of Aspire magazine. Link in the description. This segment is sponsored by Pan American Life. At Pan American Life, service isn't just what we do, it's who we are. We stand beside our agents with real support, real answers, and a leadership team that listens. When you partner with us, you're backed by a company built on trust and dedicated to helping you serve your clients with confidence. Pan American Life, where exceptional service empowers exceptional agents. Visit PALIC.com today.
Ready for the next segment today on Off the Page, and we get to welcome Luke Cosme back from Pan American Life. Welcome, Luke.
Hey, thanks for having me back again.
Luke's article was titled for the March-April, I encourage you to read it, the March-April edition of Aspire, Recruiting and Succession Planning in Focus. And just going to kick it off with a good question for you. You know, we've been hearing all about the graying of our industry, which I can relate to. But why is now a good time to focus on recruiting and succession planning?
It's a great question. And Chuck, I'm sure you've experienced the same, but over the years, I've heard people, as you attend different meetings and different conferences, say something along the lines of, you know, I've been coming to these for 10 or 15 years, and I've been the youngest person or among the youngest people at these for 10 or 15 years. And you kind of laugh about it and then you move on. Well, the reality is that risk is no longer theoretical. You know, there's some statistics from the American College and the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics that say that in the next 10 or 15 years, something like 653,000 financial professionals are going to retire or quit. And when you take into account the carriers and the home offices, there's more than 741,000 roles that are going to need to be filled. You know, there's a saying that a goal without a goal or a strategy without a plan is just a wish. Up to this point, it's kind of been just a wish. Yeah, we know that the industry is getting older. Yeah, we know that we need to do something about it. Now's the time to start doing something about it, because we've got not only an opportunity from a numbers perspective, but we have an opportunity from a messaging perspective that I think few or no other industries have.
Reading your articles got me excited because of the stats that really show that this is a very much an infinite level of opportunity, right? So there's people that are wondering what they want to do. So how, you know, what do you think why isn't insurance in particular considered like an appealing career path and compared to other opportunities in today's marketplace?
You talk to millennials, you talk to Gen Zs, and you see all the different studies, and one thing comes through. They want to be successful. They want to have a career where they can make money and they can support a family, just like we all do. But they also want to make a difference. You know, it's not just about the money. They want to leave a legacy. They want to make a lasting difference. And if you think about it, no industry is better positioned for that than us. If you're a producer in a community or in a small town, and you're a life insurance producer, you have over the course of your career the potential to have an impact both economically and from just a peace of mind perspective on your community that no one else can touch. By the time you retire, you're probably going to have somewhere between 750 million or $1 billion of death benefit in force. That's $1 billion that is going to pour back into that community, income tax free, so that people can use it to continue on with their lives, to maintain their standard of living, to help keep their business going. It's money that can be used at those local businesses. And that impact, I mean, $1 billion, that's more than if your community hosted the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and there's never been a beneficiary that said, I don't need that much death benefit, right? The appreciation for what that provides at a time of loss. And it really comes back to the narrative about our industry. We were talking earlier before we started recording today. You brought up Ned Ryerson from Groundhog Day, which I love that clip and the whole movie. When you think about it from a narrative perspective, what can companies do? What can all of our watchers and listeners do? Everybody involved. How can we change that narrative?
So if you talk to most people that aren't in the insurance industry and you ask them, what are jobs that are available? What are careers that are available? You're probably going to get one of two answers. I can be an agent or a salesperson, or I can be an underwriter, right? That's what most people think of when it comes to insurance. I mean, in reality, and you'll have to check my stats on this, Chuck, but I believe the insurance industry contributes something like 2.5 million jobs to the national economy. And those, yes, some of those are sales jobs, some of those are underwriting jobs, but there's also human resource jobs, there's marketing jobs, there's careers in finance and corporate finance. An insurance company is just like every other company out there. It has the same needs for people and the same career paths that go along with those. We just don't talk about it. The other thing I think we need to do, and this is at an agency level, this is at an agent level, and this is at a carrier level, is we need to talk more about what we do. I mentioned before, at a very high level, it's helping families and businesses and communities, but it's more than that. We need to talk about the benefits that we pay as much as we talk about the sales, as much as we talk about hitting goals, as much as we talk about profitability. We need to make sure that people understand, hey, as a company, we paid out X number of billions of dollars in death benefits last year. We paid out X amount of hundreds of millions of dollars in health benefits last year. Because at the end of the day, that's what we do. Those are the promises that we make. And we should be celebrating those things as much as we're celebrating the sales and the profitability and the commissions and everything else.
You get to do really good work for your community, for yourself, and all the families that you serve. So hopefully this message is coming across. So I kind of think I know the answer, my own answer to this question, but I wanted to ask you, who is responsible to drive the communication, and how could different participants fulfill their roles to really promote our industry?
From a carrier perspective, we can provide tools, we can provide training, more consistent messaging about what we do and how we help, and really talking to the benefit that gets paid. From an agency principal standpoint, model succession planning. Talk about what are the opportunities within this agency, what are the opportunities for career growth, and then when you're talking about your successes, make sure that you're including, and by the way, we helped X number of families. We were responsible for X millions of dollars in death benefits or health benefits or annuity benefits that were paid in the last year, so that people see not only the economic impact for that small group of being part of that agency, but the economic impact that you're spreading out into your community. Our CEO, Jose Suquet, when he goes to Latin America especially, he talks about the insurance agent being la profesión más noble, the most noble of professions, because what you do has such an amplified effect within a community, within a city, within a country. And he talks about, the impact that they have is so outsized relative to other industries. It's our organizations that have to elevate that awareness earlier. You want to make a difference? Come work for an insurance company.
Your passion is really helping me feel even better about our profession, that this is really everyone's responsibility, right? And I don't think we do it enough. I think you agree with that. It's like, this is kind of the point today. Let's really promote this industry. I didn't want to wrap up today without asking you one more question. And it kind of ties back to our conversation in episode 1. But one of your strengths that I picked up on is understanding where there are pockets of opportunity, particularly untapped opportunities. Love it if you could speak to that, because I think it shows the demand level is high or the need is high. I want advisors to understand where those pockets are.
We hear from LIMRA every year about the insurance gap. There's X trillions of dollars of insurance in force, but this is the amount that's needed. And we all agree that that's a problem, that's an opportunity at the same time. But when you really start breaking into it, what you see is that there's a stratification among cultural groups, among age groups, of where that gap is much wider than it is in other segments. Everybody wants to go elephant hunting. I'm sure you're a salesperson, you've heard the term. We want to get that big guy. Well, elephants weren't born gigantic elephants. They were born smaller. So go out there and build your own elephants. Go find those pockets of opportunity, and 10, 15 years from now, you've built the elephant. You've got your own book of elephants. I just think looking at some of those underserved markets and talking to them at their level about why is there this insurance gap in your community? Why is there this lack of understanding of the value of what we provide? Because I think at the end of the day, once you break down some of those initial walls, you'll find absolutely there's an opportunity, and absolutely there's a desire to protect families, to protect businesses, to protect communities.
The resources are endless. The opportunity is really seemingly infinite. So I wanted everyone to be excited about that point today. So once again, Luke, you're a natural. It's really great to have you part of this. Love your passion. Don't change that. It was very nice of you to come to Minnesota in January for episode 1. I think it was about 5 above that day, but I know we'll have you back today. We had you on Zoom, but great job, and I really appreciate you being part of Off the Page with Aspire.
Chuck, thank you again so much for having me here. Thank you for what is an incredibly important and timely topic for our industry. And for anybody that's watching this, I would just say, remember the words of our CEO. We are in la profesión más noble.
Yeah, we definitely have you back. Thank you so much, and definitely see you in the future. Have a great rest of your day and quarter here, and hopefully a great year in 2026. So take care, Luke.
You as well.
You can find Luke's article on page 8 of the March-April edition of Aspire magazine. Link in the description.
I'm so excited and happy to be bringing on a very good friend of mine from a long time ago, but she stayed in touch, and she is Teague Wright, president of Highland Capital Brokerage. Welcome, Teague.
Well, hello, and thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here with you.
We're just delighted to have you, and we had talked before, of course, about closing out this episode about an abundance mindset, something you and I both really think about often, and what an advantage that is, as opposed to thinking everything's so scarce. And there is a temptation to become a mile wide and an inch deep in this business. So you got to make sure you pick your spots. But it really ties into what I think about with you and Highland Capital and many other BGA organizations and carriers, that there are so many resources and specialists out there that can help you as a financial advisor do your job. When you think about abundance mindset, what's that mean to you, Teague?
Well, I guess the first thing that I think about is it's a good time to be in the insurance planning business. Some of our listeners may have seen the data point that 11,200 Americans are turning 65 every day, Chuck, through 2027.
Unbelievable.
The list of data points like that are long, but just that alone, what the possibilities are endless. And there's more than all of us combined would be able to seize in terms of opportunity.
From an advisor standpoint, when they work with your company and really across the industry, what are the ways that the abundance mindset plays into the advisor's practice from your perspective?
First of all, I really like and have tried to adopt this philosophy from, Stephen Covey's famous book, so that I don't operate out of fear. which is to me synonymous with a scarcity mentality. And some of my best friends are in this business. You know, I'm following Gonzalo and Kevin Brayton on your first episode. Those are two of my best friends in the world. And
Agreed.
there's enough for all of us to go around. And I guess that just sentiment, if you think about that in your business and your mile wide, inch deep comment, it's tough to be all things to all people in this world because the insurance business is arguably made up of insurance that's done very transactionally, and then there's insurance that's done from a planning perspective. And then there's the entire wealth spectrum of these people. There are advisors who are very fluent in understanding life insurance, and then there's some that are not fluent and don't want to be fluent. And so trying to be all those things to all of those different cohorts is enough to paralyze you when you're running a business. But back in 1989, when I started in the mailroom, and I think I was finally promoted to a case manager in like 1991,
Yeah.
Sun Life came out with the survivorship product, and it was the first in brokerage.
I remember that one. Yeah.
And our value prop back then was strictly having a new product alternative.
Access to that product, right?
Period. That was
Yeah.
the value prop. But
Yeah.
now you talk about this Thanksgiving table of all the things available. If it's for nationals, impaired risk, if it's, you know, advanced planning because you are in a business with business owners or legacy planning, any of that, most of us have what's available to the advisors. And the beauty of it is we're so specialized that I believe, this is just my opinion, but any advisor, even if they are very fluent in this space, still needs a partner because the products, features, and benefits change like the weather.
Sure do.
The choice is too voluminous to keep track of. And so even if you're a very experienced advisor, you need a partner. And so then you can pick and choose, if you're an advisor, of what parts of someone's value prop you care about.
Working with you too, and you just have a great spirit, Teague, that makes me want to collaborate, you know, and I know that's the culture that you represent at your company. And we really need that across the industry. Nobody's alone. We all have each other. It's such a noble profession, right? And so let's be optimistic about 2026 and beyond. Maybe you'll work 50 some years, who knows? So I'll try to keep up with you. So
I'm still trying to keep up with you, Chuck.
Well, just a delight to get to talk to you today. Think abundance, think optimistically, and Teague, it was really important for me to have you on early on and off the page, so thank you for being part of it today. We're going to have you back, though, too, so plan on joining us, maybe in studio next time right here in sunny Minnesota.
I would love that, and especially in the summertime. And thanks to you and to Pam Sheehan and Aspire Magazine. I'm just so delighted that this has come to life.
Great to have you. Thank you so much. Have a great day, too. We'll see you next time.
Okay, thank you.
You've been tuned in to Off the Page with Aspire Magazine. Thank you from our Off the Page team. Executive producer Pam Sheehan, host and associate producer Chuck Anderson, contributing editor Catherine Thoreau, videographer and director Eric Lindholm. We look forward to having you join us on future Off the Page episodes. Until then, be happy and be well.